Let me tell you a strange thing. There came a day, some years ago, when a friend of mine, Chaerephon, returned from Delphi in a kind of fever. He had gone to the oracle, that most sacred voice of the god Apollo, and asked a question no man of sound mind would dare ask. He asked, "Is there any man wiser than Socrates?" I laughed when he told me this. Truly, I did. You know me. I walk barefoot, I speak too much, and I know less than a child. Surely there were wiser men than me, priests, generals, poets, men who could quote Homer backwards or speak of justice with polished tongues. But the oracle answered, "No, there is none wiser." Now what was I to make of this? I do not lie when I say I was troubled, for I knew I was not wise. I had never claimed it. I only knew how to ask questions, and how to admit that I did not know what others claimed to know. But the god cannot lie. So either the god was wrong, unthinkable, or I must not understand what wisdom truly is. And so I made it my task to find someone wiser than me, and prove the oracle mistaken. First, I went to the politicians, the men of public power, wrapped in fine cloaks, always ready with a speech, always praised in the assembly. Surely one of them must be wise. I asked a few questions, simple ones, really. What is justice? What is the good of a city? How should a man govern himself? They answered quickly, with great confidence. But when I asked for clarity, when I asked them to explain, their answers collapsed like dry leaves in the wind. They thought they knew, but they could not explain what they meant. They used big words like virtue, honor, state, but could not define them. So I left them thinking, perhaps he knows nothing, but at least he knows that he knows nothing. And that was a kind of wisdom. Next I went to the poets. Surely those who write of gods and heroes must have insight beyond the common man. Surely the ones who speak to the soul must understand it. But when I questioned them, I found their beauty came not from understanding, but from instinct. They wrote like flutes played by the wind, but could not tell me what the notes meant. They were inspired, yes, but not wise. They could move hearts, but not explain truth. Then I turned to the craftsmen. Now these men, they impressed me. They knew things I could not dream of. How to shape wood into ships, how to measure stone for temples, how to forge tools that serve the whole city. And truly, in their craft they were wise. They knew their art with precision. But the moment I asked about virtue, or the nature of the soul, or the meaning of life, they grew just as boastful as the others. Because they were skilled in one thing, they thought themselves wise in all things. And so I found the same pattern. They think they know, but do not. And they do not know that they do not know. So I returned to my thoughts, and to the oracle's riddle, and I began to see. The god had not praised me for knowing more, but for knowing less and admitting it. And so I said to myself, and to anyone who asked, I am wise, not because I know, but because I know that I do not know. That is all. That is the seed. That is where it begins. And from that seed, a new kind of learning can grow. You see, my friend, there is no shame in ignorance, only in pretending to be wise when one is not, only in closing the mind when it ought to stay open, only in fearing the phrase, I don't know. That is why I ask questions. That is why I walk the streets and bother people. That is why they call me a gadfly. Not because I have answers, but because I know we must question the answers we've never dared to doubt. So I ask you now, what do you think you know, that you've never truly examined? if you have the courage to admit you may not know, then you too may begin to grow wise. Shall we begin? Let me speak plainly with you now. There is a sickness spreading through Athens, worse than plague, worse than drought. It is the belief that one knows what one does not. I have seen it in the halls of power, in the bustling agora, even in the quiet courtyards of schools and temples. It begins in a man's mouth, a confident opinion, stated as fact. And from there, it infects his soul. It blinds him. It hardens him. It makes him unreachable. Let me tell you a story. Some years ago, I spoke with a politician, well-respected, wealthy, and always followed by a small cloud of admirers. I asked him, "What is justice?" He smiled. "Justice," he said, "is giving to each man what he is owed." I nodded. "And what, then, is a man owed?" He blinked. "Well, what he deserves." "And what determines what he deserves?" He frowned. "The law, of course." "And if the law is unjust," I asked, "does that mean justice is to obey injustice?" He grew impatient. No, of course not." "So what, then, is justice?" I said again. His admirers grew quiet. He grew angry. "You twist words, Socrates," he said. "You play games." But I was not playing. I was digging. And beneath all his polished answers, there was nothing. He had opinions, yes, but he had never questioned them. He wore them like fine robes, never thinking to look beneath. And that is what false knowledge does. It dresses ignorance in confidence. It builds castles on sand. But worse than being wrong, false knowledge makes a man unable to learn. Why? Because he cannot admit he needs to. He clings to what he thinks he knows. He defends it. He shouts over better minds. He mocks those who ask. In doing so, he chains himself to blindness, to pride, to stagnation. That is not wisdom. That is arrogance with a laurel crown. Now, let me show you the opposite. Let me show you what honest ignorance can do. I once sat with a humble craftsman, a stonecutter. He carved temple columns with hands like cracked leather and a gaze like flint. I asked him, "Do you know what beauty is?" He chuckled. "I know when a column is straight and when it is not," he said. "But I don't know much about beauty beyond that." I nodded. "But your columns are beautiful," I said. "That's for others to say," he replied. Now that is the beginning of wisdom. He did not pretend to know what he had never examined. He knew the limits of his knowledge. And so, he was open to discovery. He asked me about form, about proportion, about what makes a thing beautiful to the soul, not just to the eye. And we talked like equals. His ignorance was not a flaw. It was fertile soil. Because he admitted it, he made room for growth. This is what I want you to see. Ignorance itself is not dangerous. It is natural. We are all born knowing nothing. Even now, with grey in my beard and wrinkles in my brow, I still know very little. But I know that I don't know. And so, I remain free. Free to learn, free to ask, free to change. The man who admits ignorance has nothing to defend, only things to explore. But the man who claims knowledge he does not possess becomes a prisoner to his own pride. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine two fields. One is overgrown with weeds but ready to be cleared. The other is paved with stone, hard as pride. Which will grow the better crop? The field that admits its wildness, not the one pretending to be finished. So, it is with the soul. If you can say, "I do not know what justice is," or "I am not sure what the good life means," then you are ready to begin. But if you say, "I already know," and shut the door, then nothing can enter. Not even truth, I urge you, friend, to watch your mind. Notice when it becomes certain, without reason. Catch yourself when you speak with too much pride. And practice, even with small things, saying, I do not know. Try it. Say it aloud. I do not know. Feel how light it makes you. It does not make you smaller. It makes you open. And in that opening, something wiser can enter. So I leave you with this. Is there anything you are sure of that you've never truly examined? What idea do you carry like a shield, but have never turned over in your hands? Find that thing. Say, I do not know it as well as I thought. And then begin again, not as a master, but as a seeker. That is where wisdom begins. There is a moment, a quiet moment, when the mind says, I don't know. And instead of fear, you feel wonder. That is the turning point. That is where wisdom begins to breathe. Let me explain. When a man first admits ignorance, he expects shame, like standing in the public square with no cloak. But something else happens. The world opens. He looks at the stars and realizes. He's never really looked before. He hears a question and thinks, I never thought of that. He finds in himself the humility of a child, and with it, the power to grow. That is wonder. And wonder, my friend, is the doorway to all wisdom. As children, we are full of it. Why is the sky blue? Where do dreams come from? What is a soul? But as we grow older, we trade wonder for certainty. We begin to say, I know that already. That's how it's always been. There's no need to ask. And with those words, we go blind. We stop learning. We stop seeking. We stop growing. Not because the world has become dull, but because we have sealed our minds with pride. I say, reopen them. Become again like the child who stares at the sea and feels his smallness, and rejoices in it. Let ignorance not be your prison, but your compass. The man who knows he does not know is free to ask everything. And the one who asks everything will understand more than the one who claims to know all. Let me tell you of a moment I remember. I was sitting near the Acropolis, watching the sun shift over stone. A young boy approached me, maybe 12, and asked, Socrates, where does the soul go when we die? Now, I could have given him a speech, quoted the myths, the philosophers, the priests, but I looked at him and said, I don't know. He stared. You don't know? No, I said, but I wonder about it every day. He sat beside me, and for an hour we wondered together. Where it goes, why it leaves, what it means to be alive in the first place. He didn't leave with answers, but he left with eyes wide open, and that, I believe, is more precious than any answer I could have given. You see, wonder is not confusion. It is not weakness. It is the soul waking up. When you wonder, you no longer walk through life asleep. You begin to notice things, the way your friend speaks when he's hiding pain, the strange comfort in silence, the difference between wanting and needing, the shape of your own thoughts. These are not small things. They are the texture of wisdom, and all of it begins by saying, I don't know, but I want to. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you were in awe? Not impressed, not entertained, in awe. When did you last feel the bigness of a question, the smallness of yourself, the joy of not knowing? If it's been too long, then perhaps you've been filling your days with noise instead of listening to the soul. Make space. Be still. Let the questions come. There are things we may never fully answer. What is justice? What is beauty? What is the soul? But in seeking them, we are changed each time you wonder. You stretch the mind. You stir the spirit. You become more human. That is why I question. Not to win, not to confuse, but to awaken that wonder, in myself and in you. So tonight, ask something strange. Ask, what makes a life worth living? Or, what does my anger protect me from? Or, what part of me still sleeps? And do not rush to answer. Let the question settle in your chest. Let it hum in your bones. Let it grow wonder. Because wisdom doesn't start with knowledge. It starts with not knowing, and being curious anyway. That is the philosopher's path. That is the soul's awakening. That is where we begin. Let us speak now of a great danger. Not war, not plague, but the illusion of wisdom. There are two kinds of men who walk the streets of Athens, those who pretend to seek truth, and those who truly do. The city does not always know the difference, but the soul does, and the gods do. Let me show you how to tell them apart. First, the pretenders. You know their names, the sophists, men who wear fine robes, speak in measured tones, and call themselves wise. They do not walk the streets as I do. They stand on platforms. They take coin for their words, and they speak not to search, but to perform. They say, "Come to me, and I shall teach you to win every argument. Pay me, and I'll show you how to sound clever in the assembly. Give me your drachmas, and I'll make your son a success." And I ask, is that wisdom? Is wisdom something to be bought, to be sold, to be pretended? Number. The sophists do not love truth. They love victory. They do not ask to understand. They ask to trap. They do not admit ignorance, for they are afraid. Afraid that if they say, "I don't know," the coin will stop. The students will leave. Their polished image will crack, and so they wrap themselves in cleverness. But underneath, there is no soul in it. They are masks, hollow, smiling, empty. Now, let us look at the seekers, the true philosopher. He is not always clean. He is not always popular. He may speak plainly. He may even annoy you. But he asks and asks and asks, not to shame, not to impress, but because he cannot help it. The question burns in him. The not knowing humbles him. And the truth, however slow, however painful, draws him like light. He says, "I do not know what justice is, but I want to. I have studied, and still I wonder. I may be wrong. Help me see." That is the mark of the seeker. He admits his limits, and in doing so, his soul begins to expand. Let me give you an image. Imagine two men in a dark cave. One wears a mask, beautiful, ornate, carved to look like wisdom. He holds no light, but he wants others to think he sees. So he stands tall, speaks loudly, and mocks those who stumble. The other man holds a lantern. Its flame is small, but it is real. He walks slowly. He bumps into walls, but he learns the shape of the cave. He sees more each day, and if you follow him, you may begin to see too. That is the difference. The mask hides ignorance. The lantern admits it, and lights the way. Some ask me, "Socrates, if you know so little, why do people follow you?" And I say, because I do not promise answers. I promise only that we will seek them together, and not pretend along the way. That is the freedom of the seeker. He is not trapped by pride. He is not bought by praise. He is not afraid to say, "I do not know," and because of that, he is always learning. So now I ask you, do you wear a mask, or do you carry a lantern? When someone questions your belief, do you become angry or curious? When you hear a truth that challenges you, do you defend your pride or examine your soul? When you speak, do you speak to look wise or to become so? The world does not always know which one you are. But you do. Your soul knows, and so do the gods. Let us be seekers, not performers. Let us walk with questions, not masks. Let us light the way, even with a flickering flame. And never again pretend to see in the dark. Now we come to the fork, in the road. The city is full of words. Every street corner has someone claiming to teach wisdom. But not all who speak of truth love truth. There are pretenders, and there are seekers. Let me show you the difference. A. The sophists, masters of false knowledge. The pretenders are called sophists, clever men, trained in the art of persuasion. They wear fine robes, speak with polish, and, most of all, they charge a fee. Come to me, they say, and I will make you wise. Pay me, and I will teach your son how to win any argument. Give me coin, and I will give you power. But listen closely. They do not offer wisdom. They offer performance. They teach students how to speak, but not how to think. They offer the mask of wisdom, without the substance. And what's worse, they fear the one phrase that opens the door to real learning. I don't know. They cannot say it. They cannot bear it, because it threatens their image, their business, their illusion. So they pretend. They argue. They twist language like a rope. But underneath the show, there is nothing. B. The true philosopher. Now, let me show you another kind of man. The seeker. The true philosopher. He does not wear fine robes. He walks with dust on his sandals and questions in his mouth. He does not sell knowledge. He shares the journey. He does not promise answers. He promises honest pursuit. He asks questions, not to trap others, but to understand. And yes, he often says the most powerful words in all of philosophy. I don't know, even after years of study. Even after sleepless nights with scrolls and sages, even after all his seeking, he still leaves space for the unknown, because he does not confuse certainty with truth. And in that humility, he becomes wise. The lantern versus the mask. Let me give you an image. Imagine two men walking through a dark cave. The first wears a mask, beautiful, polished, carved to look wise. He stands tall and proud, but he cannot see. Still, he refuses to admit it, so he pretends. He bumps into walls, misleads others, but never removes the mask. The second man holds a lantern. Its flame is small, but it is real. He walks slowly, carefully. He knows the danger, but also the beauty. And with every step, his light grows. The first man hides his ignorance. The second man uses it. That's the difference between the pretender and the seeker. One is afraid to be seen as foolish. The other is brave enough to be foolish in pursuit of wisdom. Some say to me, Socrates, why do you question everything? And I say, because I am not a mask. I am a man, and men must seek, not perform. Let them call me foolish. Let them mock me for not knowing. It is better to admit ignorance honestly than to wear the mask of false wisdom. The gods do not bless the mask. They bless the flame. So I ask you, are you hiding behind cleverness? Or lighting the path with humility? Do you speak to impress or to understand? Do you fear being wrong, or do you welcome the growth it brings? The world cannot always tell the difference, but your soul can, and so can the gods. Let us choose the lantern. Let us be seekers, not sellers. Let us walk in wonder, not pretense, because it is better to stumble in honest pursuit than to stand tall on a lie. Now we've come far together, haven't we? We've questioned the wise, we've unmasked the pretenders. We've stood in the beautiful tension of not knowing. And yet you may still ask, Socrates, how do I actually live this out? How do I practice admitting ignorance in a world that rewards certainty and punishes doubt? The answer is simple, but not always easy. It begins with this. A. Watch your own mind each day. Watch your mind like a quiet shepherd, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, when do I pretend to know? When do I speak from pride, not from understanding? Why am I afraid to say, I don't know? You will be surprised at what you see. We speak from habit. We repeat what we've heard. We nod along just to fit in. But when you slow down, when you pause before giving your opinion, you may catch yourself. Do I know this? Or am I just afraid not to? That moment, that pause, is where practice begins. And what should you do in that moment? Say the words aloud. I don't know. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. Say, I don't know, but let's find out. I'm not sure. What do you think? That's a good question. I've never considered it fully. These phrases are not signs of weakness. They are signs of strength. They tell the world, and yourself, that you value truth more than pride, and that is the root of all philosophy. B. Use it in conversation. Now let's go further. Don't just admit your ignorance to yourself. Use it in conversation, as a tool. You see, something remarkable happens when one person says, I don't know. It disarms pride. It opens curiosity. It invites others to think, not perform. Let me tell you a story. One day I was speaking to a boy, no more than 10. He asked me, Socrates, where does the wind come from? I could have answered with myths, with clever metaphors, with some half-remembered theory from a traveling astronomer. But instead I said, I don't know. His eyes grew wide. You don't? No, I said, but it's a good question. Shall we wonder about it together? We sat, the two of us, old and young, ignorant and curious, thinking aloud, not solving, but exploring. And do you know what happened? He began to ask even better questions, more thoughtful, more honest. Why? Because he saw that even a man praised or feared in the city could still say, I don't know. He saw that learning was not about pretending. It was about searching. And so he became a seeker, not a showman. When you speak this way to others, when you model it, you give them permission to put down their masks too. You create space where people can wonder. And that, my friend, is sacred. So I offer you this practice. Each day, admit one thing you do not know. Aloud, ask one question you don't have the answer to. And in every conversation, try to listen more than you speak. You don't need a school or a temple for this. You don't need scrolls or money. All you need is a mind willing to admit its limits and a heart willing to grow. Let me ask you plainly, what's something you've been pretending to know, out of habit or pride? Say it now, even quietly in your thoughts, and then say, I don't know, but I'm ready to find out. That is the seed. Plant it, water it, return to it, and over time, you will become not just more informed, but more human, more open, more wise, more free. That is the way. That is the path, and it is one any soul may walk, if it has the courage to begin with these words. I don't know. Let us return now, one last time, to where this began, to the sacred stones of Delphi, where the priestess of Apollo once spoke a riddle into the world. No one is wiser than Socrates. And beneath that, carved into stone for all who approach the temple, Gnothise auton, know thyself. For years I have pondered these words, not just with my mind, but with my life. And I have come to this. To know yourself, truly, you must begin not with answers, but with admitted ignorance. You must say, there are things I claim to know, but have never truly examined. There are beliefs I carry that I have never tested. There are words I speak whose meaning I have never dared to question. Only when you say, I don't know, does the soul become ready to learn. That is wisdom, not a trophy to hold, not a destination to reach, but a practice, a pursuit, a way of being. I am not a teacher, I am not a sage, I am not a man of answers. If I am anything at all, it is this. I am a man who keeps asking. And I invite you to ask too. Ask bravely, ask humbly, ask even when no one else will, because to seek truth is to honor the soul, and to admit ignorance is to begin to see. So before you go, let me ask you one final time. What do you claim to know that you have never truly examined? And are you ready to say, I don't know, and begin? If so, then you are already wiser than most. Not because you know more, but because you are ready to learn. And that is the first and final step